get us going. And hopefully the Minister will be here shortly. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to attend this 2025 federal election webinar. My name is Skye Kokoski-Moore. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the CEO of Children and Young People with Disability Australia, or CYDA. We are the national representative organisation for children and young people with disability, aged 0 to 25, their families and caregivers. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're all joining this webinar today. For me, that's the lands of the Kaurna people here in the Adelaide Plains, and I pay my respects to all elders, past and present, and thank them for the care and custodianship they have provided to our lands, seas and skies over millennia. I'd also like to acknowledge any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. As you can see, we have Auslan interpreters and captioning available today. I'd also like to gently remind all speakers to speak slowly and clearly and to use your name before speaking. This assists with the interpreting. We also ask that speakers use content notes if they think that something they will say may be uncomfortable or upsetting for others. CYDA also has a Safety and Wellbeing Officer who will be available after the webinar if you would like to speak with her in case anything comes up today in our chat that impacts your wellbeing. We will put those details in the chat. Well, there's only 5 more sleeps until the election this Saturday, the 3rd of May, and more than 2 million people have already cast their vote. With more than 500,000 children and young people with disability across the country and a record number of young people voting for the first time, this election is a significant opportunity for Australia to elect members and senators who are prepared to drive meaningful reform for people with disability and their families. It's CYDA's hope that today's webinar will assist voters with your research so that you can make the most informed decision as possible when you go to vote. And a big thank you to those who submitted questions when you registered for today's event. We have used your questions to inform the questions we are putting to the panellists. We won't be able to take questions from audience members during the webinar, but we do encourage you to reach out to our panellists and other candidates about questions and issues that are important to you. So today, on our panel, we are joined by the Honourable Dr. Anne Ali MP, the member for Cowan, and the most recent Minister for Early Childhood Education, Minister for Youth, and the Minister assisting the Minister for the NDIS. We're also joined by Green Senator Jordon Steele-John from Western Australia and Independent Senator Tammy Tyrrell from Tasmania. We did ask the Liberal Party to attend today's webinar, but they declined. So thank you so much, Dr. Anne Ali, Senator Steele-John and Senator Tyrrell for being here. We have 3 questions that we would like each panellist to respond to. And to our panellists, as this webinar is for 45 minutes, please limit your responses to 3 minutes for each question. I know this might be a big ask because I know you'll have a lot to say, and I will hold my hand up when you have 30 seconds left for each question. And I may also need to interrupt if we're going over time. Dr. Ali, I know you have another commitment to get to this afternoon, so I'm going to go to you first with all 3 questions. I'll ask them one at a time, and then I'll return to the senators so that they have the opportunity to respond. Okay, so to get us started, are you ready? Great. So question number 1. Despite consistent recommendations, early childhood education remains under-resourced for children with disability. What is your party's position on increasing funding and access through programs like the Inclusion Support Program?
Thank you, Skye. Can I first start by thanking CYDA for bringing together this forum today, but also for the continued engagement that we've had over the last 3 years that has been invaluable to me in my role as Minister for Early Childhood Education and Minister for Youth as well. So thank you very much. The question is around early childhood education and children with disability in early childhood education and care. One of the principles that I operate with, and that is a clear principle of the Albanese Labor government, is a belief that all children should be included and be able to access early childhood education and care, no matter who they are, no matter what their background or their circumstances. We've made significant progress towards that. I do want to mention our abolishment of the prohibitive activity test. That abolishment of the prohibitive activity test, replacing it with 3 days of guaranteed subsidised care, will support families of children with disabilities who have been left out of early childhood education and care because of the circumstances of their parents. We're also establishing a $1 billion Building Early Childhood Education Fund to build services in areas where they're needed the most. From day one, I have taken accessibility and inclusion to be a central pillar of our plan for a universal early learning system. As you would know, the Inclusion Support Program provides that critical tailored support to early childhood education and care services for children with additional needs. We've invested an additional $203 million in the Inclusion Support Program over the next 2 years. That is on top of our base funding of $133 million per year to help meet demand for the Inclusion Support Program. We've also commissioned a comprehensive review into the ISP. We also have a review undertaken by the Productivity Commission and the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission as part of their broader reviews of early childhood education and care. But I want to make a point here, Sky, and that is that any future approach to inclusion support must embed inclusion in our early childhood education and care system. That is my goal for our reforms as we move forward with further reforms of early childhood education and care, is to have inclusion support built into how we fund, how we operate, how we consider quality of early childhood education and care.
Sky speaking. Thank you so much, Dr. Ali, for getting us started and for that response. I'll move us on to question number 2 now. The Disability Royal Commission recommended a number of measures to support inclusive education across Australia. One of these was to introduce a national roadmap to inclusive education. Can you discuss your party's position on the introduction of a federal roadmap as per recommendation 713?
Thank you, Sky. Anne speaking. I want to first of all talk about the progress that we've made toward better safeguarding in the community, enhancing human rights and improving accessibility and inclusion, and the work that we'll continue to do on that. Specifically on recommendation 713, we have accepted this recommendation in principle, and the Minister for Education, Minister Jason Clare, continues to work with his colleagues through the Education Ministers' meetings in relation to that recommendation and other recommendations of the Disability Royal Commission. We believe that children and young people with disability have a right. They have an absolute right to high quality education, to well-supported teachers, and to meet their needs and aspirations. We will continue to work with states and territories on this. I want to talk about the school funding agreements because I think this is an important part here. These are the agreements that our government has reached with every jurisdiction. improving quality of data on disability in schools that we are getting from states and territories to help us inform our future policy decisions. Now, as part of these agreements, the Commonwealth provides an extra 5% of the schooling resource standard to all states and territories except the Northern Territory. That lifts the Commonwealth's contribution from 20% to 25% by the year 2034. This will see an estimated $16.5 billion in additional Commonwealth funding to schools across the nation over the next 10 years. But that money comes with some agreements and some conditions, including targets for priority equity cohorts. That includes a trend upward for priority equity cohort students in strong and exceeding NAPLAN proficiency levels, and a student attendance rate for priority equity cohorts. That includes students with a disability. The agreement also includes commitments to ongoing implementation of Australia's disability strategy and national reforms that are particularly focused on students, on equity cohorts, which includes students with disability. And that includes more individualised support for students, more small group tutoring, more mental health support, and measures to improve engagement. So through this agreement, the dollar value of students with disability loading will increase for students in government schools.
Sky speaking. Thank you so much. We'll move on now to the third and final question. This one is a little longer. There have been some comments from candidates regarding tertiary education. SIDA has concerns that offers of free or subsidised tertiary options have not taken into account the provision of supports required by students with disability or the need for systemic and cultural change in universities and vocational education and training providers to ensure that all students with disability can succeed. How will your party ensure that young people with disability are not left behind in tertiary education, particularly when it comes to the provision of disability supports, accessible learning environments, and funded adjustments?
Thank you, Sky. Anne speaking. Of course, all educational institutions are legally required to make reasonable adjustments to support the participation of students with disability. That is under the Disability Discrimination Act and Disability Standards for Education. But we recognise the need for more support, and so we are also targeting our support for people with disability to ensure that students studying at TAFE or university are not left behind. I'll start with university. We've got additional funding to help students with disability access university. That is the Higher Education Disability Support Program, or DSP. That provides funding to universities to assist with supporting students with disability to access, to participate, and importantly, in their outcomes in higher education as well. We have increased the DSP by $40 million per year. That means funding has increased from $13 million to $53 million in 2025, and that is indexed each year. Funding under the DSP is allocated amongst all 38 Table A universities under the Higher Education Support Act, and it's conditional on the money being spent on disability support. We are going to continue to work with stakeholders to ensure that there are higher levels of performance from universities in return for this individual funding. And I know that SIDA and your members will be critical stakeholders in this process. Subject to this consultation, this could include things like mandating disability inclusion action plans, increasing the requirements for universities to employ people with disability, changing the balance between overall support and support for high needs students, and strengthening financial accountability and reporting regarding disability expenditure. I'll move to TAFEs very quickly in the final part here. Thank you. TAFEs are charged with supporting students no matter what their backgrounds or circumstances to be successful in their studies. The analysis of NCVER 2023 student data shows that a higher proportion of students at TAFE identify as belonging to priority cohorts, including 8% identifying as having a disability. Our fee-free TAFE program, under that program, 8% of enrolments have been people identifying as having a disability. We will also increase the Disability Australian Apprentice Wage Support payment from the 1st of July 2025 to support employers taking on apprentices with disability. And we have annual review checks for apprentices with permanent disability. Well, they will be removed to reduce the administrative burden. So in closing, we have made some progress, some good progress on ensuring that students with lived disability are not just getting the opportunity to go to TAFE or university, but what I refer to as substantive equality, which means that they are supported through their learning journey so that their outcomes are also equal. Moving beyond disability inclusion being only about access and equity to it being about substantive equality and outcomes.
Sky speaking. Thank you so much for that. Thank you for your really well-considered responses. And thank you again for taking the time to be with us and our community this afternoon.
Anne speaking. Thank you, Sky. I apologise that I can't stay any longer. I really appreciate this forum. And as I said earlier, I appreciate the engagement with CIDA and I look forward to continuing our engagement.
Sky speaking. Thank you. All right. Senator Tyrrell, you are joined today by Senators Jordon, Steele-John. He's just had to duck away for a moment. So if it was okay with you, I might go to our first question and pass the mic to you. So I'll read it out and then we'll hand over to you for a response. So question number 1. Despite consistent recommendations, early childhood education and care remains under-resourced for children with disability. What is your approach to improving outcomes for young children with disability?
Thanks, Tammy speaking. We've had several reviews into the childcare sector and they've all recommended that the inclusion support program receive more money. But I hear that the rates of assistance haven't gone up for years and it's not helping providers or families to cover costs, which is truly tragic. And I'd be very happy to support more funding for this program, but we want to make sure that changes are made to the way it's run as well. These reviews found the program is an administrative burden, has ineffective implementation, isn't meeting the needs of many of the children under its care. It's best that we don't throw money into a broken system. We need to ensure that a system is effective and working cleanly and clearly for the families and for the people that are trying to get education. It seems wrong to me that we keep on putting dollar signs over people's heads. It's real people in real situations. And they truly need to understand that the government's at play, that human beings are at play. And these people that we're trying to educate, no matter who they are, they're going to go out into our communities and advance technology, advance teaching skills within our communities. They're the future politicians. God help them if they want to be politicians. But I wish many people who are trying to educate with a disability would get into politics, because we need to have a real life perspective of how the legislation, the regulations, and the policies that we put out into the communities are actually impacting on people day to day. And people like myself who come from real life experience, they should have a go. They should be there. They should be listened to. They should be heard. That's my answer to the first question.
Sky speaking. Thank you so much. Just while we're waiting for Senator Steele-John to return, I wonder if you would be happy to answer a question without notice.
Tammy speaking, I'm always up for something random.
Great. And that's just something that for the attendees today, to help them understand the role that both you and Jordon have in the Senate, and what that means for the passage of legislation or proposed changes to government. Like, why is the role of the Senate important?
Tammy speaking. The Senate is the place where checks and balances are made. It's a bit like, you know how the kids come to you and they have this pie in the sky idea that they want to have KFC or McDonald's for dinner on Friday night? Well, the Senate is the grown-up in the room saying, can we afford to have McDonald's or KFC Friday night? Does it have nutritional value? Does it give you value for money? The Senate is important in that there is usually an imbalance in the numbers, meaning that it has to get passed across different colours within politics. And Jordon and I both look at legislation and policy from completely different perspectives. And we try to bring something new and additional to the table to give insight into a different aspect of anything that comes across from the lower house.
Sky speaking. Thank you for that. I think it's important context for everyone who may not be familiar or who might have learned about and then forgotten the role of the Senate. So what I might do, though, is move us on to question number 2, and we'll loop Senator Steele-John back in once he's here. So the second question that we had was, again, similar to the one that we asked the Minister, and that's about the Disability Royal Commission. So the Disability Royal Commission, or the DRC, recommended a number of measures to support children and young people with disability across Australia. Can you discuss your position on the government's response to the DRC?
Tammy speaking. Well, my position in the Federal Senate is a little bit different because I'm all by myself. I actually can have a truly independent opinion without having to take into account other members around me from my group. But roadmaps for me are a flashy way of the government saying they're doing something when often they're really not doing anything at all. I'm less concerned about the introduction of an official roadmap as long as things are being put in place to make sure that students are getting the best education and care that they can. The students should always be uppermost within anybody's concern. Are they getting value for money? Are they getting a good education? My understanding is some of the current education agreements in place with states and territories already mention the needs of students with a disability. And I agree that there should be better transparency from state and federal governments about how they go about putting these provisions in place. The Disability Standards for Education Act 2005, the DSE, I think the acronym is up for review this year, and this could be a great way to get action now. Maybe CIDA can campaign for some of the points from the roadmap to be included in this review now. I would guess that you already have a plan too, though. I think you're up on it. And I'd like to think that if an education provider receives government money, then the same inclusion standards would apply to everyone.
Sky speaking. Thank you so much for that, Tammy. We'll go to you now, Jordon. I just asked Tammy the first and second questions, and also a question in the middle, a question without notice about the role of the Senate. So I'll go to you with question 1, invite your response, then question 2, invite your response. And if you also wanted to offer your thoughts about the role of the Senate in Australian politics, we'd really welcome that too.
Right. So, thank you very much. And would you be able to give me the 3-minute warning for each? Otherwise,
absolutely.
I'm likely to run together, and then that won't be a good answer. So awesome. Thank
Sky
you.
speaking. I'll ask the question, then I'll pause to allow you to respond, and I'll raise my hands like this when you've got 30 seconds to go. Okay, question number 1. Despite consistent recommendations, early childhood education and care remains under-resourced for children with disability. What is your party's approach to improving outcomes for young children with disability?
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sky, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat with CIDA's membership today. I've had the privilege of working with CIDA since I first entered the Senate 7 years ago, and have found the organisation to be an invaluable voice and source of advice for me and my team in that work. I'm coming to you from unceded Noongar Budja in Boolaroo, Perth. And it's wonderful to be able to talk on this topic, particularly because it's one of those areas where when we sat down 2 or 3 years ago to begin planning our initiatives for the federal election, inclusive childcare was one of the things that we prioritised, and we put forward not only a broad series of funding reforms to childcare generally, but a specific $500 million grant system over 4 years for childcare centres to invest in inclusive practice and to invest in inclusive physical design as well. Because at the end of the day, if we are going to end the ableism and the discrimination that is inherent in segregated education and discriminatory practice, it needs to start at the very beginning of the educational cycle, not just come in kind of first and secondary levels of education. So I'm quite passionate about this area because so many disabled kids experience their first sting of ableism in childcare settings, and we really need to make sure there is the funding on the table to enable the accessible practice and the physical changes to be made, so we don't instead try to change the child, which too often is what happens now.
Sky speaking. Thank you so much. And you were doing absolutely perfect with time, so no dramas there. We'll go now to question number 2, which is about the Disability Royal Commission. So the Disability Royal Commission, or DRC, recommended a number of measures to support children and young people with disability across Australia. Can you discuss your party's position on the government's response to the DRC?
I most certainly can. I was lucky enough to be part of the campaign and the push for a Disability Royal Commission, a campaign that in some ways was 20 or more years in the making to get that, and there was a lot of hope and faith and goodwill given to both sides of politics to undertake that historic investigation. When the government delivered its response after making the community wait for years for that, there was tremendous frustration and a sense of betrayal and opportunity lost because the government responded and accepted so few of the recommendations that were given. I think some 6% of recommendations were all that were actually supported by the Commonwealth. Now, one of those areas of the report where I think Labor did such a shocking job in their response was in relation to young people, particularly in education. If I look at their response to the recommendation number 7.13 in relation to the National Inclusive Education Roadmap, the fact that they could only bring themselves to accept in principle the idea that we should even have one, which sometimes is just a glossy document, but often also is a foundation point to decide the direction of travel, was bad enough, but that they simply noted 7.15 in relation to segregated education and its elimination was outrageous. I think we've got to be really clear. What the Royal Commission said was that by about 2050, we would have moved to a situation where we don't have segregated education in Australia anymore based on disability. That would mean that a child born today to a disabled, to a parent would see their child educated in a segregated setting, and the government could not even get themselves on board with that idea. And that actually indicates to me that you don't want to progress towards a equal place of inclusion. Not you don't think it can be done, or it would take too long, or we're going to be careful. You simply don't want to get to that spot. That's not acceptable. The Greens support full inclusive education, inclusive work, inclusive healthcare, and the implementation of all recommendations of the Commission that align with disability human rights. We want to end the cycle of segregation and begin that process with urgency, the urgency that it demands.
Sky speaking. Thank you very much for that, Jordon. We are now moving on to the third and final question that we had for both panelists. And I know that I said it at the start, the questions that we were asking today were informed by some of the questions we received from attendees prior to the webinar. So we apologise that we can't have questions coming to you live from the chat, but if there's time sort of towards the end, I might open up to you both if you wanted to say some final messages to SIDA and the community before I let you go. But so question number 3, and for this one, Jordon, I'll go to you first and then Tammy second. So this third question, there's been some comments from candidates regarding free or subsidised tertiary education. SIDA has concerns this doesn't go far enough for students with disability. What is your party's position on improving future education and employment pathways for young people with disability?
Well, this is a great question because, of course, it recognises that we need a broad-based change to the tertiary education system to make it functional again, and then we need specific reforms on top of that to make it work for disabled people. So we do need to eliminate student debt and to make it free to go to university and TAFE again, because it's not fair that literally one generation, including the current PM, went to uni for free and then has denied that to this generation. So if we solve that and we fund unis an additional kind of 10% Commonwealth loading so they can provide good quality service, pay their staff properly, now that will make a huge difference. But we also need to go on top of that, and we propose as the Greens a inclusive education fund to ensure that people who are teaching in these spaces are able to be given a proper inclusive education training in a tertiary setting, so they know what their obligations are, they know what their requirements are under the law, and they know how to put this teaching into practice, and then they know how to maintain and are funded to maintain that standard of expertise as it evolves over time. So that's number one. We also want to institute a Minister for Disability, head of a Department of Disability and Inclusion, of which education would be an element within that department, giving us a consolidated location to advocate for the removal of these issues. And then I think one thing that often goes untouched here is the need to reform the Disability Discrimination Act. It is over 30 years old. It is toothless as a legislative tool, and it needs to be transformed into something which enables an individual who experiences ableism and discrimination to flag that, for that then to trigger an investigation, which is taken on by an administrative body with the heft to take the load of the complaint so that the complainant isn't crushed under that themselves. Make a ruling in relation to not only the individual case, but to set a standard or a precedent for all similar cases, and then to enforce compliance. We need that because that would allow a student to make that complaint, get that outcome, and then not force every other student in the same situation to have to re-go through the process.
Sky speaking. Thank you so much for that. And you still had 30 seconds if there was anything else that you wanted to add.
I think, oh yes, I would actually, just in the area of what is taught within the content of all disciplines, but particularly healthcare. and education. We need to be putting inclusive education training within those courses and inclusive delivery of healthcare within those courses into the course material throughout, not just as an optional extra. Oh, I did a diploma in inclusive education at the end, which is great. I love those diplomas, but every teacher graduating, every health professional graduating should know how to deliver inclusive service.
Sky speaking. Thank you so much. Now, over to you, Tammy. Would you like me to read the question again, or are you happy to go?
No, I've seen the question. How do you follow up after Jordon? Tammy speaking, by the way. I come from an able-bodied world. So I have this horrible hope that everybody is included when it comes to education, but I understand that there are gaps in the system. And that is probably a little bit people like me, my fault, because we are able-bodied as such. But universities and publicly owned vet providers want to sign up students with a disability because no matter who you are in this world, you have value, you have worth to the community, to the village at large. And you need to be given the same respect as anybody on this planet to get the appropriate education so you can service the people in your community appropriately and do yourself a service too by being educated. And I'm hopeful that appropriate services would be in place. I know that a lot of modern universities, they have facilities in place to accommodate people who have a diverse background and disabilities. But I know that there's a lot of schools out there that are behind the times. I know the college I went to till year 12, I would not want to be a person who faces challenges because they put a lift in afterwards. And trust me, every tower has stairs to the top. So how is that inclusive? How is that encouraging to a person who has physical limitations to get up there? Look, it's the 21st century. I'm sure they will come up with a solution sometime soon or build a new school. I think a lot of the schools in our communities are old though, and they need new infrastructure put into play. Checks and balances should be in place to make sure students with a disability have access to the resources they require. One of my previous lives was a disability employment service provider in the employment services land. And it's really hard to help a person achieve their personal goals when there's limitations out in the real world, be they physical, financial, or educational. There's no way that somebody can attend a school that has physical limitations if there's no way for them to get inside the building. And I know that some buildings do have those limitations, and not everybody has the perfect storm like here in Launceston where I am, where there's a brand new university campus, custom built to ensure that inclusivity for everybody is there, be it physical or whatever limitations you have. And I'm hopeful that all our communities at some point will build brand new schools because the TAFE system is in a terrible shambles. Look, I'm open to hearing about what isn't being addressed by unis and vocational providers because you guys are the experts and I am here to listen. I listen to Jordon all the time. He's a wealth of knowledge and I could learn so much more from him. But a university with HECS loan of a student with a disability is worth every bit as much to them as that of a student without a disability. And they should have all the resources in place for a student, no matter what challenges they face, that they can attend and be present and be educated. Maybe more with support from the Disability Support Fund and the Higher Education Disability Support Program would bring even more money back to the university so that they could support and help people. The federal government supports an EPF for employment services, but they have limited funds available for a disability employment service contract participant. And I think that's rubbish. If you want to be educated, if you want to progress in this life and be the best astrophysicist you possibly can be, do it. If you want to be the best service station attendant on the planet, do it. But you need to have the opportunity. You need to have the door open in front of you. Thank you.
Sky speaking. Thank you so much. We've only got a couple of minutes left. I wondered if both of you have any final words that you'd like to share with the webinar attendees today. The election is this Saturday. Some people may have voted already, but there's a lot of people who haven't. So really would love to hear from you, maybe 1 minute each, your final sort of comments to our webinar today. Jordon, I might go to you first and then Tammy.
Thanks so much, Sky. Look, the Greens have heard really clearly from the disability community during this campaign that a lot of us are hurting, that a lot of us are really struggling right now. As people, we are experiencing the same cost of living crisis as the entire community, food being as expensive as it is, housing being so unaffordable, healthcare filled with cost-based barriers. And then on top of that, we deal with ableism and we deal with discrimination. We get kicked off the NDIS because organisations are either defunded or nowhere near as funded as they should be. And a lot of us are rightly frustrated with both Labour and the Liberal Party because of this situation. And I think my message to the community at this election on the 3rd of May is that if we want change, we have to vote for it. We can vote for a parliament with more Greens and more independents that will not support Peter Dutton into government, but will work for the disability community across the entire breadth of the crossbench to get the Disability Royal Commission recommendations implemented, to fund the NDIS properly, to make healthcare more affordable and housing more affordable, to get cheese back down below $10, that'd be fab. Like all of these things can actually be done together. So thank you so much for your time and good luck on election day.
Sky speaking. Thank you so much. Tammy, over to you.
Those that are lactose intolerant, Jordon, we don't care. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, cheese substitutes. I'm not sure what's happening with cheese substitutes at the moment. You can let me know.
Tammy speaking. Look, what I would like to say to the cider community is you punch way above your weight. And you have a great amount of people out there that will advocate for you and support you. And cider is one of your best champions. They lobby for you with a great heart and a solid, strong place on this earth. But what Jordon said in relation to independence and people that do not have a party mentality, I will 125% back. We, as independents and people who think a little bit left of centre, always look at how our communities are feeling, how our communities are struggling under what mainstream politics have done to them in the past. And I highly encourage anybody to go out there and meet their candidates. If you see them in the street, ask them the questions that you secretly want to ask them, be it peanut butter, crunchy, smooth, or in between, or where they stand on, you know, the rights of the child in our community. Should we have a stronger human rights commissioner and enable some kind of strength there so as that human rights actually mean something? That women should be recognised and have equal standing within a community as anybody that faces a physical, mental or social challenge in this life. We should stand up for each other. We should look after each other. And that's all I'm going to do for the last 3 years and the next 3 years of my term, because I do not see political colour. I do not see colour of any kind. I just see the faces before me and want to do the best that I can for those faces. Yours included, Jordon. Thank
Sky
you.
speaking. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of today's webinar. Thank you again, Senators, for taking the time to be here today. This is an incredibly busy time, we know. Every election is important, but this one is particularly so for children and young people with disability and their families. We encourage everyone here to further engage with candidates and parties in your area. And if you would like to support CIDR's advocacy, please head to our social media pages and to our website. On our website, you'll find our pre-election asks that we've sent to all candidates, as well as a pledge that you can sign to join with others to demand real accountability for inclusive education. So thank you again, everyone. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your advocacy, and we hope to see you all again soon. Bye for now.
See ya.